All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Winner Circle on the It's More Than Just Money Movement channel. Remember, if you haven't subscribed, click on that subscribe button. Click on the like button if you like this. I promise you are going to like this conversation, and comment. Let us know
Just
what
clicking
your
like.
thoughts are.
I'm subscribing.
Let us know what your thoughts are. So today I'm sitting with Mr. Ronen Aires. He's an entrepreneur. He's a businessman. He's an author. He's a breakthrough facilitator. He's a speaker, and he works a lot with mental health now as well. And he also empowers leaders to discover themselves and do amazing work in society. And he's impacted his company through his company, Student Village. He has impacted, I think, hundreds of thousands of people across South Africa, and I'm one of them. Because the first time I ever got a job, and the only time I've ever worked for anyone, actually, was when I worked for him. I started off as an intern, then I became an campaign manager, then an accounts manager. I was a facilitator. I did a lot of stuff for you, bro. All in 1 year.
We've got a lot to be thankful for.
I've got a lot to be thankful
We
for.
also do.
Yeah.
So I think it was a dual relationship. We got so much from you, but I'm sure you learned a lot in that year, which set you up for your
You know
your
what I
future.
wish? I wish all young people can get into a company that can allow them to explore like I was allowed to explore. I mean, I was new, but I was designing promoter training programs. I was designing campus manager training programs. I was facilitating those across the country, by the way. The first time I was ever on a flight, your company took me on that flight.
I remember that day.
So that was one of the most exciting moments of my life. But today is about you, and I want to get into your story because a lot of people see your company out there, and I know you've never even been on the forefront and said, "This is my company. This is the work that we do." And you've been an entrepreneur almost half your life, more than half your life. You've been an entrepreneur. When did you start Student Village?
So the idea started in the year 2000. Were you even born?
Yeah, thankfully I was born.
Okay. So we started in the year 2000. And what's really interesting is what was the world like in the year 2000? So, like, do you even remember?
New millennium.
How old were you?
I was 11.
Okay, so 11, you definitely didn't have a phone.
No, I didn't have one.
The internet was reasonably new in South Africa, and I happened to be in a job that time, my only job.
You had Investec
Yeah.
at the time.
So
yeah.
you and I have one thing in common. We both had one job.
Sure, definitely. Yeah.
And in that job, what I was doing is actually buying time to avoid making a decision about going into the family business. And I knew deep down inside that I didn't want to go into that. And we'll talk about it a bit later, about the realizations why I didn't want to go in and how that actually led to the start of Student Village.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the world back in the year 2000 was pretty much still analog. And a friend of mine who was consulting at the bank, so we were in our mid-20s, and we decided we had sold our souls out. We thought, how could we be working for these big companies and these big corporates? That's not who we are. Like, from a young age, we knew we wanted to be the masters of our own destiny. We wanted to create an impact. We wanted to do something that would make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew in our jobs that while we may be good at them, that literally we were totally replaceable. And if we never came back to work, it would make no difference to the company. And so at the age of 25, I was having a midlife crisis. I was overambitious and an early bloomer in terms of having a crisis. And that crisis was really when I looked left and right. I didn't want to be where I wanted to be, or where I was. I knew I wanted to make an impact. I knew I didn't want to go into the family business. And at that time, a friend of mine had just qualified as an electrical engineer from Wits University, and his final year project was to create a website. Now, in the year 2000, to create a website was a big deal. And so we came up with this idea that we loved.
So your friend was still in varsity?
He had graduated and he was consulting at the bank because in the year 2000, 1999 going into the year 2000, they were worried that all IT systems were going to collapse. And the world was going to come to an end. The millennium bug. It never happened.
Yeah.
So he was consulting at the bank at the time. And so we used to sit in the canteen every morning, swapping our tales of misery, how we got to where we are. And then we decided we're going to craft this plan. And we looked at different things that we could do. And the one thing we agreed on is we actually loved being students in that era of our lives. Like we thought that was such a cool time. And we felt that students weren't taken seriously. So young people weren't taken seriously. Collectively, we believed they had a voice and they had value and purchasing power. And at that time, it was impossible for a company to connect with students unless they were physically on campus. Like there was no online version. There was no mechanism to create a student community unless you went to find them. And so we decided we're going to create this. And that's where Student Village, the website, started. And that's where the business started with that idea.
Did you know you were building something as massive as it is now then? Or was it just you were building what you were seeing then at the moment?
So it's a bit of a mad story. Because on the one hand, I knew part of the reason why I didn't want to go into the family business was I felt misunderstood. So
by the family?
Yeah. So,
okay.
So I had my grandparents and my parents in the business already. And I was being groomed from age probably below 10. I was working in the business. So when you spoke about your 1-year internship, I'd had already, by the time I was 18, I was running the business. So my internship started before I was 10.
Sure.
And so that was, I would say, one of the biggest privileges I ever had was just growing up in a business and learning how to do business. But also what you learn during whatever experience you have, be it a relationship, a business, or a job, you learn the good things and you learn the things that you don't want. And so what I learned in the family is there was a lot of conflict and I felt misunderstood. I had different ideas for the business and I wasn't particularly passionate about that business. I wanted to make an impact in the world. And I didn't feel the business was a good business and it's still around today and it sells toys. And I didn't believe...
Was it like a toy company?
Yeah. And I didn't believe that my purpose in life was to sell more toys. I actually wanted to go out and make a difference to people. And so I knew that my dreams wouldn't be realized through that business, but at the same time, I didn't know where it would be. So the most interesting thing is if you're a young person, like if when I was in matric, there wasn't the internet. So if you had asked me in matric, what did I want to be when I grew up? It was impossible to know something like Student Village would be the thing because the internet wasn't around. So kind of what I tell a lot of young people these days is things are changing so rapidly. Don't be so attached into what you want to do because the next big thing is forming and things are changing so rapidly. This time last year, we weren't even talking about ChatGPT. So the thing that you'll probably do in life probably hasn't been created yet. Or the thing that you know you're going to go into is probably going to be disrupted by the time you get into it. And so I had no idea that Student Village would be my thing. I never intended for it to be kind of like a lifetime gig. And at the same time, it's delivered a huge amount of purpose and meaning and frustration and anxiety and all the mental health problems that come with running a business at the same time. And the thing about Student Village is that it's been felt like my baby. It's one of those things that I've never intended for it to be, like I said, my lifetime's gig. At the same time, very hard to let go of because I care about it so much. And so the crazy thing is when we started it, I had no idea about technology, zero background in it. So my partner had that. I was kind of brought in from a marketing point of view and how to create a commercial business out of it and bring clients in. I had no background in marketing either. And so kind of what we had to start is we started in a bedroom that was smaller than the room that we're in now. And we started in my partner's house. And we really faked it till we made it. Like we knew nothing. We went to sell dreams to clients. We made storyboards of how we'd represent their brand and how we'd connect with students. And we believed in ourselves. And I think that was the biggest thing. We had, like, I couldn't have started on my own. It was so important to have this partnership early on where we could lean on each other because we both had different sets of skills. And the first 6 months, or even the first year, we lived day by day. We didn't know if we'd be around the next day or the day after. Like we had nothing but just dreams. And it was that constant check-in every morning. Are we still good? Are we still going to go out and try this? Are we still in?
Yeah.
And just to tell you a quick story, because like in 2001 was when we officially launched. And there's a lot of things that went right and wrong.
Launched as in officially launched the business.
Yeah. And put ourselves out there. We were planning from the year before, but 2001 we went in. And I remember on the 11th of September 2001, most people remember what happened when the plane...
Is it 9/11?
9/11, when the planes flew into the Twin Towers. That was the first year of Student Village. And we hadn't earned a salary the whole year.
Had you quit your job already?
We had quit our jobs like that. I'd quit first at the end of 2000 or end of 2000, and went into nothing. We were self-funded. We took our measly little pensions from our jobs. We put that as seed capital. We were looking for funding. Everyone laughed at us. This was the end of the season 1 of the .com era. It was now the .bomb era.
Mm-hmm.
And we said we're starting a website, and everyone thought we were crazy. So
after the 1999 boom.
Yeah. So one is most people said, you guys are great, but it's not going to work, and no one would invest in us. And that actually proved to be a blessing because we got to retain the shares when it did work out.
Yeah.
The second thing was when those planes flew into the towers, we thought, okay, so this is the end of days. This is the start of the end of the world. And so if the end of the world is close, we might as well pay ourselves our first salary. So we hadn't taken out a cent from the business.
For how many months? For like 10 months or
10
so?
months.
Yeah.
And we were we felt so guilty that we were taking from the business. We had got used to living on fresh air and love.
Fresh air and love.
And donations that we felt so guilty. You know what? We gave ourselves $5,000
each.
And
Nice.
it was
because we thought the world was ending.
Yeah. So and if you think about it, at the time, it was such a big thing to do, to say like we're actually worth it. At the time, like $5,000, and it's like and I'll never forget that moment. That was a deciding moment to say that we're actually, like, we've got a business and we're actually worth actually earning from it. And that was a turning point for us.
What did that do for you individually?
So, when you're in that startup mode, you're so fixated on making the project, the idea, the concept work that you're not focused on the money. And until you get a sense of that there's some kind of traction, you feel that you're a failure. You either feel like you're overridden by chronic imposter syndrome, or you feel like this thing's not going to make it, and you don't. It often triggers off your self-belief and that self-love story, and it just gives the inner critic too much voice. So every day you're battling with that sense of failure, that sense of, am I good enough? that sense of, will this work? And if it doesn't work, am I a failure? And so with every day that goes past, you're constantly asking those questions like, am I good enough? And that it may not be in those words, but all your fears and anxieties and everything that you worry about is that sense of, can I make this dream a reality? And in that, am I good enough? Will it amount to something? Will I be able to look after my family? And and you become so tied to the success of it. So if it succeeds, you generally feel good about yourself. And on most days when it feels like you're failing, you really, it can trigger off your worst nightmares, because you live with this sense of failure, even though on the outside you might look like you should be on the cover of Forbes magazine.
So how did you, I mean, I'm listening to you now, and you say all you wanted to do was serve people, right? Here was a business that your parents were saying to you, we've built this for you, take it over, run it, make money. And I'm sure money wouldn't have been a problem because the business was third generation now. But you decided, I won't be serving people if I do that. Where did that conviction come from?
So it's a very interesting question, because I can't trace it back to a specific moment. I think my parents, I grew up in a small town called Springs on the East Rand. And way back when, so here's a little fun fact, it was the largest gold producing town in the world.
It's dead now.
Yeah. Now it's the largest ghost town in the world. So, I grew up in a...
So there was a rush at the time.
Yeah.
Gold rush, basically.
Yeah. And that's what brought people there. And I grew up in a family that put community, so family and serving community and humanity as one of the priorities. And so with that, so almost to be in service. So while we're here, and not to get religious, this is more from a spiritual point of view, to say that we're not here as some kind of random act. We're here as agents of that which is higher than us. And when we're here, whatever we choose to do is to really make sure that we make a difference and help mankind while we're at it. And so you could argue, there's a successful family business, just take over that and use the material gains from that to invest back into the community.
And help people, which is what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So that could have been the first route. But I think I would have been really miserable in that. And while it may have been a financially easier road to take, I've always felt like I'm the guy who takes the road less traveled. I don't mind if it's the harder road, but I wanted to make it my life helping people. I didn't want to use the fruits to help people. I wanted to create the orchards that help people. So it wasn't, for me, my calling was really to help, to make my life work helping others.
So out of that, I mean, your company has been the launchpad for many successful young people, myself included, right? It's a place where people actually come and train and become great elsewhere. And you've allowed that for more than 23 years now. Was that initially the intention for you to build a company that's going to allow thousands of young people to come in, train, grow, be better elsewhere, or even start their own businesses? Or is it just something that happened out of coincidence?
Yeah, so it's a good question, because there's a term that they call the unintended consequences. So the unintended consequence of coming through the student village system, whether you're a student, an ambassador, a campus manager, account manager, full-time person, whichever door that you come in, the unintended consequence of being with Student Village is you get life experience and you get taught skills that you're not being taught at university, not being taught somewhere else, that set you up for success.
Do you remember what you said to me when I got my degree? When I went to graduate?
Burn it. What did I say?
You said exactly that. You said I must burn it. You'll teach me the real skills.
Yeah, because, unfortunately, in most places around the world, people over-index the importance of that piece of paper. To this day, we hire people for their potential. I really don't care what anyone studies. For me, it makes no difference what they study. I hire people. And so at Student Village, it's really important, like we tap into the soul and the potential of the person and really not what they study. And so unless you want to be in a defined thing, like I want to be a doctor, then you need that degree. If you want to be an actuary, if you want to be those kind of professionals, the degree helps. So I'm not bashing the degree. But people think that once they have that piece of paper, it's enough. And what they'll learn, either the hard way or the easy way, it's all those other skills. So, can you run a budget? Can you run a project? Can you run a team? Can you troubleshoot if things go wrong? Can you deal with clients? Can you kind of operate in the world? Can you hustle? Can you deal with failure? Can you deal with things that don't go your way? All those kind of things they don't teach you at university. That doesn't come with that piece of paper. Do you have leadership skills? Do you, can you collaborate? All these different kind of things you learn when you're part of the Student Village ecosystem. So what's the one thing so in South Africa, we've got a huge problem with youth unemployment. So say at least 2/3 of our youth are unemployed. But they're almost unemployable because some of them, they've been a product of the basic education system, which has failed them. And two, they haven't had an opportunity to apply themselves. Once you have an opportunity, your chances of getting either gainful employment, so something that will give you an income, or you generally start your own business or something, once you've had an opportunity and you've had some experience.
Yeah.
The biggest barrier to entry is not enough people are offering experience. And so what we've done is for hundreds of thousands of young people offered experience at various levels. And for me, I don't even know the impact. I have no idea how many people we've helped. Like, that's an estimate, but it's probably a lot bigger. And so we know that for every person we help, 5 or 6 people benefit.
Sure.
And so we know, like, the reason that Student Village exists on the front end is to help to connect brands and youth to brands to either promote their products and services, their job opportunities, or bursary opportunities. But if you scratch below the surface, what we really do is we teach the necessary skills for young people to thrive in the world. And those are the things. And you know how many gems we've created in various industries.
Yeah. And
I think as part of that experience, people get
and
confidence.
Some of the industries are non-marketing related industries.
Yeah. And so the thing that you get, so when you learn these kind of skills, you also get confidence. You get confidence to make your first move, to take your first step. You also get noticed by other brands, by other people, and it opens doors. And the magic happens once you get that opportunity and you make something with that opportunity. So those that really do well and see this as an opportunity, just like you did, you didn't plan on staying for a year, it just happened that way. But in that year, you juiced that fruit, you made the most of it. You did everything possible to make the most out of that opportunity. And I'm sure you learned a lot, and you also learned what you do like and what you don't like, and created your own path through that.
Yeah. No, definitely. Having built the business and it had been around for many years, and there came COVID, right, which threatened many businesses, big and small. And I know with you, with Student Village specifically, we used to do a lot of campus-related work. And when the president said, no more gatherings, no more going to school, how did that affect the business?
So imagine, because that was around end of February, March.
Feb 2020.
Yeah. So at that time, I remember I was overseas.
And now you what, 19 years in business? 19, 20 years in business?
We were primed to have the best year of our existence. So Feb 2020, I happened to be in Amsterdam at an entrepreneurs conference, part of the entrepreneurs organization. At that time, I was running a global program in almost 80 countries as a volunteer. By the way, that's the best way to, like, if you volunteer in an organization, that's the best way to
weren't you their head at some point here in SA?
Yeah. So at times I led various programs, and then globally is where I managed to do some of my most impactful work is to that's where you can learn to express yourself as a leader and learn the best skills for no price but your time, and there's no downside. So if you fail, you don't lose your business, you don't lose your income, and you get a lot of learning. If you succeed, you get a lot of learning. You get no income, but you get a lot of learning. So for me, it's the best university of service to be is in those kind of organizations. But to get back to the question, so I happened to be in Amsterdam in the beginning, towards the end of Feb in 2020. It was going to be our best year. And then the reports started coming out. I even remember asking the guy at the hotel that I was staying at in Amsterdam, do you think this is going to be a thing, this COVID? And it turned out, this is bullshit. And he said, just carry on, don't worry. So I carried on. I remember I was flying through Heathrow on the way back. And so a few days later, things had really ramped up. And I remember Heathrow, the beginning of March, there was no one there.
At the airport?
At the airport, no one. I remember waiting for my flight, and this airport was completely empty. I thought, we're in trouble. And so I got home, and what was quite interesting is my family were too nervous to be around me. So I was in self-quarantine just because they thought I might have it. And everyone was so nervous what was happening. And we went from going from this was going to be the best year of our existence to literally within 2-3 weeks, our marketplace shut. So it was like the taps just got turned off. Our business flew off a cliff. And so one of the lessons that I learned many years ago is actually from the chairman of Smolin, our shareholders, said, lessen your dependencies. So we
lessen your dependency.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that can mean different things in different contexts. So in our case, we needed to have an additional revenue stream then from our activities on campuses. So we'd never planned for a scenario of, there's always been protests and other things that might shut down a campus for a few days, a week, or whatever, and you kind of work around that. We had never thought of a scenario. What happens if campuses were closed indefinitely? So now we couldn't do business if campuses were closed, if that was our only source of revenue. So it just so happened that we had another source of revenue by managing corporate bursary funds. And that was the only real annuity income in our business. And that was the part that didn't shake in COVID. Yeah. The rest literally closed. And I would say we were doing probably 10% of what we were doing the year before. And if it wasn't for having that additional revenue stream, we would have had to either endure huge losses or close.
The bursary management department.
The bursary management held us together. If we didn't have that, we either faced huge losses or closure. Like that's how dire things went in a matter of 2-3 weeks. Because the clients that first the campuses closed, and the clients that We said, well, let's do something else. Let's do digital. And some said yes, but majority said, see you after COVID. And that was basically 2 years.
That's if you'll be around after
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah. So really in COVID for me was a very interesting time. So going from...
How did you overcome the mental stress that came with it?
Yeah. So some of it was through distraction. So I'd had my pre-COVID crisis before COVID. So a year before, I'd actually found myself, or it was a little more than a year before, I felt myself like burnt out. So I don't know if you've ever felt that you've been doing what you've been doing for a long time. It doesn't bring you the same amount of joy as it did initially. And whether it's a relationship, a business, or a job, that you've ever felt like just that feeling like I'm done. I don't know if you've ever felt that. Whether it's your marriage, your business, your job, your something that used to bring you so much passion that now doesn't excite you, it actually depletes you, actually makes you miserable. And I found myself in that position pre-COVID. And really what I wanted to do was get to the bottom of why I'm feeling this way. So if you had to ask me at that time, can I buy a student village? I would say, here are the keys, it's yours, I'm out.
Sure.
That's how bad it was. Yeah. And so often when we get ourselves into a hole, it's really, you can't trust your feelings. So it's an interesting thing. Like most people say, can you control your thoughts? What do you believe? You think you can control your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so, to a certain extent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I had to say to you, think about a pink elephant. Can you see a pink elephant in your head?
Now, yes, I can see it.
Okay. Now stop seeing the pink elephant.
I still see it.
Exactly.
Yeah, which means I can't control it at this moment.
Yeah. So that's the notion of we can't control our thoughts, and we can only control our behavior and our reaction.
For some odd reason, I saw it even behind you.
So really burnout is just, it's chronic exposure to stress and not dealing with your emotions or your pressure or whatever's going on in your world effectively enough on a day-to-day basis. And over time, it accumulates. And the reason why I brought in around your thoughts was as you decline mentally, you start believing the stories that you're hearing in your head. So it starts off by, I'm not interested in my business. I'm not really excited about things. I'm not really sociable with my friends, or I'm distracting myself with other things, or all of those kind of things. And you start disengaging with the thing that really brought you passion. And so I wanted to get to the bottom of why I was in a hole mentally. And it's an interesting story. A mentor of mine said, you have to read this book. And she was a retired trauma therapist. So she had a good sense of me. We had worked together for many, many years. And she had seen what I was doing in the world of entrepreneurship, in leadership development, in sport, and all different aspects of life and community. And she said, I've been begging you to read this book. And I don't know if you've ever been in a hole before mentally.
Was it because she was realizing that you were doing too much?
That was one of it. But if you've ever been in a really tough place, someone says, read a book.
I don't want to read it. I don't want to read it. I want to get out of this thing.
Yeah. So she forced me to buy the book and read it. And what happened is that again, unintended consequences. She pushed me in a certain direction, and I landed up training with the authors of the book in the US for 3 months.
It's Stealing Fire.
Yeah, the book is called Stealing Fire, and in 2016 it was.
You must tell them you also bought me the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just told you. And really, the book is a manual on how to use your body and your brain to find your mind. How do you feel and operate at your best more often? It's the manual for human performance. And it covers things like psychology, neuroscience, pharmacology, and technology, and how you bring all of those together for ultimate human performance. So how do you find your A game no matter what the environment is? And so these guys train the Navy SEALs, they train the top executives all over the world. And I managed to somehow, and I was still in the hole, I managed to get into the elite training, the first ever elite Navy SEALs kind of training. I was one of 50 chosen from around the world. And so really pre-COVID, I learned with the best teachers, and I came back and I just worked on myself. So the
Personal development.
Yeah. So the one thing that I've learned over time, or I appreciate more over time, is if you really want to change the world, start with yourself. And so if we go to the beginning of the story, I want to make a huge impact in the world.
Yes.
You can't make a huge impact in the world if you haven't worked on yourself first. And it's not like you start with yourself and then go and then go into the world. It's a fluid thing. You're doing it all the time. And so burnout and mental kind of distress is really just, it's showing you that your cup is, or your battery is depleting, and you're not giving yourself enough time to refuel and to recalibrate.
Did fear add to the anxiety? Like fear of losing the business, losing the company, basically? I don't think you would have gone broke, but I mean, losing the work, your life's work.
Yeah. So I could have gone broke. It could be, there's a time.
You're Jewish. Jewish people don't go broke.
It can only last so long, until there's plan B. And so, it's an interesting thing. Did the fear get in the way? Well, the question is, like, the fear is always there. If you run a business, and what COVID taught us is we think we're in control until something that you haven't even thought about just is like a wave that can come take you out. And so we're living in a chaotic world, and what it taught us, and what some people have forgotten, that we live in this illusion that we're in control. So, like we spoke earlier, you're not even in control of your thoughts. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we behave as if we do. Because if we didn't, we would go mad.
We have to have some sense of control.
So really what happens in our brain over time is like a patterning device. So our brain, as you get into, say, your mid-20s and into your 30s, you're almost programmed to be the same. So your personality is largely developed, and your brain kind of keeps you in this holding pattern. Is it wants you to have the same day as yesterday. It doesn't want you to change. And it kind of holds you in this to keep you sane on the one side. And the other side, you're kind of tainted by all your life experience. So it's very difficult to change. And so in order to change, you really have to change your behavior to give your brain new stimulus so that you can create a different ending. And so this is the whole thing around human performance and not getting stuck in a rut. And so in terms of fear is like cancer. So it will fester in you. The more you feed it, the more it grows. But if you prove it wrong through behavior, it will dissipate and go.
Behavior is in taking certain steps or actions despite the fear? Yeah.
And to almost go towards the fear as opposed to running away and avoiding the fear. So the fear could be around, will I be able to pay salaries this month, or having a hard conversation to let someone go, or to work out an issue with an employee, a shareholder, a student, anyone, or a family member. And so the real thing around fear, anxiety, and all the different, like I call it the entrepreneurial psychosis that we carry. So it never goes away. It's just, can you keep it at manageable levels? So do I know how Student is going to perform at the end of this year? No, I don't. But it's about managing that fear and doing everything that you can in your control for the best possible outcome. But what that requires is for you to keep a level head and for you to constantly work on yourself, both physically and mentally, to make sure that you can have your A game. When you have your A game, you generally can attract more blessings into your life. And so we're either a victim of our environment and our circumstance, or we triumph. This is the South African story, that we have so many unbelievable stories of, especially young people, against all odds, against the worst adversity, saying, I will beat it, I will overcome it. And despite whatever challenges I've been given,
Mm.
I will rise up to it and I'll be successful.
Sure. So, I mean, there's challenges that one faces in business, and there's also challenges that one faces in their personal life. And I know one thing, one of the things, in addition to a lot of things that we have in common, is that in our journeys in business, we've been divorced.
Yeah.
And then earlier on, I don't know if we were on set yet or before, we were talking about the fact that sometimes you could be chasing and chasing and chasing and forget other aspects of your life, be it family, be it relationships with people, right? How did you, bounce back from, let's say, a divorce, and eventually remarry again and be happy while maintaining a successful business?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And, most of us think, I can put things in compartments. Like, what, I'm getting divorced now, so everything else will wait.
Sure.
None of that happens. So if you think about it, it's like changing the wheels of the bus while it's still moving. And so if you take a step back, it's like in my head, I don't, if there's a drop down menu, there's like quit, does not exist. So I knew while the end of my first marriage was looming and it was happening, I still had to show up at work. I still had to show up as a father. I still had to I couldn't drop those balls. It wasn't an option. But what happens? So if you look at the three toughest things: death, divorce, and moving house.
Moving house. Really?
Yeah.
That's tough.
So it speaks to change. So
Okay.
so they're just the most stressful events. And so divorce is also the death of a relationship. And so
True.
you're kind of mourning and trying as much as possible to so not be at war, at the same time show up as an inspirational leader and still dealing and still being a good father and still trying to keep your own sense of balance inside, which is almost impossible because you're pulled mentally in all the different directions. So when you might be working out the details of the divorce, which can some cases be easy and some cases very challenging. And that time you're being challenged as a person. Can you be the bigger person? You might have your character might come under like the spotlight and about it. When the missiles start coming and you've still got to be an inspirational leader during the day and still take your kids to school with a smile on your face. It's all about showing up despite the hostility or the change that may be happening. But looking back, it was actually a magical time. And so out of all difficulty and all chaos comes the best opportunity for growth and renewal.
Mm.
And so what happened for me was it was an unbelievable period where I could blank canvas who's Ronen. Because what happens and I'm sure like your audience would probably connect with this, whether it's through a job, a business, or a relationship. If it's a long-term thing, it always involves sacrifice and continual kind of compromise, to the extent where 10 years later, 20 years later, you can wake up and think, who am I? Where did the me go? I don't even know who the me is. And so what happened post the divorce for me was saying, blank canvas, I know who I am as a father, I know who I am as a business leader, but who am I as a person?
Sure.
And so this became, so it was the death of a relationship, which was very painful. But at the same time was the rebirth of who Ronen is, the Ronen 2.0, you could call it. And this was a period of probably about 8 years of it was such an exciting time, because the one upside of divorce is you've got, what you don't have in a marriage is you get time with your kids, you get me time, and if you're in another relationship, you have relationship time. So you actually have 3 different compartments.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got time to kind of focus on each. So that me time was so crucial in creating the new version of me, which put me into a whole different direction. And I wasn't looking to remarry, but at some stage, and I got some really sage advice from a friend. We were on a run.
Yeah.
And going into my 40s, I said, I think I'm ready to date again. And I'd worked on myself all these years. And he said, the only advice I can give you, just be yourself. And it sounds simple, but you will attract according to where you are. And so if you've worked on yourself, you hopefully attract a good relationship. I was lucky. And as they say, for those that choose to marry, marry well. For those that don't, you'll become a philosopher.
If you marry wrong, you'll be a philosopher. You do sound philosophical. Is it because of the happy. First marriage? So I love what you just said, because a whole lot of men specifically, most of the time, don't make it out of divorce for many reasons, right? It's like a part of them is left behind at that particular marriage or that particular relationship. Do you have any advice for men? And then we'll get into the book. I mean, it could be based on mental strength. What's the importance of mental toughness for men? What advice do you have for them?
So I've got very different advice for men. Mm-hmm. So if you look in the South African culture,
actually, and females, when you're done with men, advise females as well.
Yeah,
I mean, they go through divorce too, don't they?
Absolutely. So this is generic advice, but at the same time, I think it's a good time to focus on men just for a few minutes. And South Africa is an amplified version of what's happening around the world. So if what I'm about to say happens around the world on level 5 out of 10, in South Africa, it's probably 12 out of 10.
We exaggerate everything.
Yeah. But I think this one is just, because I think we have too many single parent households. We have, if I speak to almost everyone in the student village team, and I say, like, did you grow up with your father? 80% would say no. Is your father currently active in your life? From almost no to somewhat. Or
to have never met him.
Yeah. And so now this is a very complicated story. And we don't have enough time to go through why it is the way it is, but we can all agree it's not right. And so if you want to cure the trauma of the past, having a strong father figure in your world creates so much stability in your inner world. And so part of the work that I do, and I work a lot with leaders and men and women, but particularly with men, around showing up. So just be the change you want to see. So think about what you didn't receive from your father, or what you did receive, and think, how do I change things? How do I show up to my kids, to my siblings, to my colleagues, as if I did receive it. And how do I be the ideal person? Because then you break that chain of trauma that is many generations old. And the only way we can do it, if, like we said before, change starts with yourself, is how do you choose every day to show up? How do you be best friend, best colleague, best father, best partner, best whatever you are? You need to make that decision to show up from your highest potential, from your highest version of yourself. And that's how we'll start curing the kind of epidemic that we have of the absent father.
Mhm.
And so everyone kind of gets that from a business perspective. I said, like, how should you be as a leader? Most people will know. You want a visionary, you want someone to be present, you want someone leading from the front. When it comes to being a father, suddenly they disappear.
True.
Or they're so busy in that they forget that there's so much responsibility there. And so there was an interesting quote, which you could also probably debate, but the only people that will remember that you constantly worked late hours in 20 years' time will be your kids.
Kids.
And so on the one
Definitely.
hand, you can decide,
God, Daddy was never here.
Yeah.
Always working.
Yeah. Now, on the one hand, they paid for their private school fees, but the other time, deep down inside, they wanted quality time with Dad. And so we're now in a world where we're recalibrating what that means. And what I'm seeing from a lot of leaders is actually that they make the choice. Yes, I do want to hustle. I do want to be successful, but I want to make sure that I have a close relationship with my family.
But does balance actually exist, Ronen? Or are you now balanced because the business is already successful?
So balance is the wrong word. Integration.
Integration, okay?
Yeah. That means that if I choose to today, that earlier on that I wanted to be with my kids because they're on school holidays, then I would make a choice and work around it.
Sure.
So it's all about choices, At given times, sometimes you have to be all work. Sometimes you bring in, actually, I want to pull back and spend more time with the family. It's all about recalibrating how we do things. And so I think we've never lived in a world now where everything's on the table. We can talk about gender fluidity, we can talk about mental health, we can also talk about what's really important. How am I going to show up, and how can I integrate it all in? So I can be watching a sports game that one of my daughters are participating in. At the same time, I can be working, but I'm there.
Yeah. Why did you write the book Preach?
So,
and for who?
So this goes back to the COVID story. Business flies off the cliff, and then you become a therapist to the survivors that are still in the business. And while you're thinking of pivoting and trying to stay alive, I remember this one moment. And now I think at that time, Student Village had been around a long time. I'd been into many boardrooms, and I'd been asked by the executives. So what would happen is they'd be so excited about these young people they bring into their graduate program. They'd come into the company and they'd meet them. They'd think, well, who are these people? They're not like us.
Mm-hmm.
These young people.
Too different.
Yeah. So I would be brought in to the boardroom to help the executives understand young people. Now, go back into COVID, and I remember I was lying on the couch, similar to this. The TV was on in the background, Netflix was on, phone was on the side. I was probably in my underpants and I had my laptop on and was about to take my first Zoom call of the day.
Did you have a jacket on?
And I remember at that time and in that moment, I realized that then it was the millennials, but just call it the youth, that they were right. So think about it. For at least 10 years before that, young people kept on saying, this was the friction that was in companies saying, why do we have to work these hours, this 8 to 5? Why do we always have to be at the office? Why do I have to be chained to my desk the whole day? Why can I only take lunch at between 1 and 2? And so there was this friction of how we do work and how we do things, but no one was listening. And so what I realized in that time is that when the executives brought me in to understand youth, they didn't want to understand. What they really wanted was,
You wanted to convert them.
exactly, how do we make them like us? And so what I felt like what the pandemic did for us, it forced us to rethink and rethink in ways that young people were already there before. They were already thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to know the future, all you have to do is look youngwards and look at what is important to young people, because that's almost a third of the population. They are the future,
Mm-hmm.
and they will be leading our world. They're sent here to fix our mess. And so I felt in that moment there was a story to tell. I also didn't feel like learning new gardening tips and cooking courses and all the other things that people were doing during COVID. I was interested in really telling the story.
Making banana bread.
Yeah. I wasn't interested in those like milk smoothies and all the other things that my kids were trying to teach. And I really felt that this was an opportunity for me to tell the story that every leader needs to know to understand young people and how they are disrupting the world, not will be, how they are, because the power is in the collective. And two, for young people to feel like someone gets them and to give them a voice and to almost help them feel normal and not misunderstood and to understand what their power is. And kind of it's where it's led me to is that the book has traveled into the right places, which was the intention to get into the right hands of influential people so that the conversation will start around serious change, around how we do things around here, whether it's the workplace, governments, civil society, wherever. Which has led me on to my next mission is how do we change the course of a country that is really feeling really down and really apathetic about its future.
Mm-hmm.
And so the key to get young people active. So if I told you that 90% of 18-year-olds in this country aren't registered to vote.
That's a big number.
18 to 25, it only goes down to 80% aren't registered. So if we can convert 10% of those, 20% of those to get to the polls, as a collective, they can show their power and change the direction of this country. And so beyond the book was the fire starters. So that was the blitz before the charcoal. What's really the big mission now is to really get young people to come together as a collective so that we can make serious change.
Sure. Any words that you have for the viewer at home? Any words of encouragement, inspiration, Ronen quotes? You remember the Jewish quote you shared with me? This too shall pass.
Yeah.
What is it in Hebrew?
Gam ze yavo.
Gam ze yavo.
So
this too shall pass.
Yeah.
That's the one you shared with me. I'm not saying share that one.
Yeah.
But you can share it if you want to.
There's a few. So if you start on that one, it's like it's very similar to everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, then it's not the end.
Yeah.
So it's very similar there. But I think what we were talking about today, I am Jewish and I always lean back on the ancient teachings and these are universal teachings. And the one of my favorites comes from hundreds of years ago. And I'll say it in Hebrew so it sounds more poetic.
Yeah.
Im einani li mili. And so if I'm not for myself, who will be there for me? And if not now, when? And so that sounds like the most selfish statement that anyone could make. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Like that sounds like the opposite of Ubuntu. But when you think of it, if you put yourself first and you put your self-development first and you make sure that your cup is full, then you can go to the next stage of helping everyone around you. So make sure that you're okay so that you can help your neighbor next to you who may not be okay. And if you're not okay, then reach out to support from someone who is. And so if you want to change the world, you've got to believe that the first place to start is with yourself. Make it your daily project, that this is your life project. You'll never land the destination that I'm there. This is a lifetime's work. So start today. Small steps, your behavior. Behavior is king, not what you think. Whatever you do consistently every day will decide whether you're successful or unsuccessful. That's the big difference between successful and unsuccessful people, is that no matter what they're feeling, they do what they know what's good for them. And that's what makes them successful. And so help yourself, make sure you look after yourself so that you can look after those around you.
Wow. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I know how busy you are. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us, to empower the youth, the future leaders of tomorrow. So it's your life's work, and yeah, I appreciate
you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, was Mr. Ronen Aires, the founder and CEO of Student Village, the author of Breach, speaker, entrepreneur, businessman, and he shared a lot of nuggets with us. I hope you liked it. Comment, let me know which of the nuggets were more relatable to you. You know, which ones did you relate with? And yeah, comment, share this video, make sure a lot of people are exposed to this interview. And from myself and my team, it's more than just money. We'll chat soon. Ciao, ciao.
Boom.
Boom.
Yep, that was awesome.
You happy?
That was
Yeah.
awesome.
You happy?
Hey, you didn't even want to move.
No.
You usually move around. Today, like, you were stuck.